June 1944. The Second World War had reached a critical moment. The only way to stop Hitler in his tracks and to reclaim lost territory was to launch the largest seaborne invasion in history, the moment that became known as D-Day.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
The D-Day invasion was spearheaded by paratroopers. Leaping into the unknown, their job was to prevent enemy reinforcements. Without their actions, Allied victory in the West would not have been possible.
I have to tell you, everybody says we're heroes, and that isn't true. We volunteered to do this, we trained to do it, and we were paid to do it. That does not make you a hero.
There could have been no spearhead and no paratroopers without the workhorses of the sky, the Douglas C-47s, the airplanes that flew in their hundreds across the English Channel to Normandy, charged with delivering the Airborne Divisions to their rendezvous with destiny. One airplane had to lead the way.
It seemed totally beyond comprehension that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion, this incredibly important artifact, would be in a scrapyard. There's just no way that that can be true.
I just had a feeling there's something special about this airplane. And he said, well, that airplane was a lead plane into Normandy.
This is the story of the men who found and who were determined to restore this iconic aircraft, of the plane's part in one defining moment in history, and of a dream that she should fly again back to the coast of France to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That's All Brother, the plane that led the D-Day invasion.
At the end of May 1944, the whole of northwestern Europe was under Nazi control, but that was about to change.
For the invasion to stand any chance of success, it was imperative that the Allies first secured strategic objectives behind enemy lines. The only way to achieve this was to drop troops in from the air, and the C-47 Skytrain was derived from the civilian Douglas DC-3 airliner to fulfill this role.
It was a great airplane to fly. I thought they should make one in gold and put it on top of a mountain. But I love the airplane. It's the most forgiving airplane in the world. And, well, you know, it wasn't made by mistake.
Without the C-47, you don't have any paratroopers. We're not very emotional, but most of us are emotional about a C-47. I can't explain it. Most of them would give the right arm to ride in a C-47 today.
Over 10,000 C-47s were built between 1943 and 1945, and it proved to be one of the most durable and successful of all transport planes. Just as these planes were being built, new shock troops had to be trained in this new form of combat. And so, in time, were born the paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions.
The least miscalculation or any problem, you're out. They sent you to 27th Infantry Division. Had us all sit on a hillside one day and said, I hear you people aren't happy. Yeah. You don't like the food? No. You think I'm too hard on you? Yeah. He said, well, I'm going to tell you, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets any better. And then he walked away. And that was it. But when we got to combat and saw how he operated, there isn't a man wouldn't have followed him to hell and back.
But what of the plane that led the invasion, the very tip of the spearhead? She was neither remembered nor accounted for. Had she, in fact, been lost to history? Apparently, no one knew. Then, by chance, two military historians, Matt Scales and Ken Tilley, found themselves in possession of some key evidence that might help to resolve the mystery of the missing plane.
I heard a rumor that a member of our squadron had flown the lead C-47 on D-Day. And I thought, and I knew who the pilot was, John Donaldson. He had been a member of my squadron since 1924. And so when I hear this rumor, I said, no, that's the wrong kind of plane. It's the wrong part of the world. So I said, can we figure out, where this rumor is coming from? Okay, he didn't fly a Pathfinder aircraft. Okay, well, what's the main wave, the lead wave behind the Pathfinders? Find out that it's the 438 Troop Carrier Group. And so Ken takes me up to the third floor of the archives, and we pull the 438's history. And there's a picture of John Donaldson as the commander of the group. And it says, Colonel John Donaldson, along with Lieutenant Colonel David Daniel, took off in C-47 4292847. And we were floored, because it's very rare for even partial tail numbers to be listed in histories. It's unheard of for full tail numbers to be listed in histories. And so when we saw that, my attention at that point immediately shifted to the aircraft.
Having established that John Donaldson had indeed transferred squadrons and flown the aircraft that led the invasion, Matt then set about tracing the serial number, 4292847. To his surprise, he discovered that the plane still existed, but her fate was uncertain. She was in the boneyard at Basler Turbo Conversions at Oshkosh, Wisconsin, where many airplanes are given a new life, but only after major, irreversible modification.
I was familiar with Basler. I knew, what they did, and I thought, there's so many DC-3s and C-47s out there. Why this one? And so I actually called Basler and said, hey, I don't know if you know, but this airplane led the invasion of Normandy, and they were very nice, very, very nice. And I said, just thought I'd let you know, and they said, okay, thank you. And so I just thought, well, that's all I can do.
Some years later, Matt, as a proactive member of online Warbird communities, discovered that the lead plane, thought to be named in wartime Belle of Birmingham and usually assigned to Donaldson and his crew, might be up for sale. This could only mean that she was still intact. By good fortune, a member of the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying warbird collection, was then alerted to the story.
I read a blog article from Whitman Regional Airport in Oshkosh, and it seemed to be saying that the airplane that led the D-Day invasion was sitting in the boneyard at Basler. The idea that an airplane that had a significant place in history had been basically rediscovered really captured my attention. And now I'm working for the CAF, the world's leading World War II aviation preservation flying museum, and I'm thinking, wow, this could be a great opportunity. This is the kind of airplane that this organization should aspire to own.
The mystery of the missing plane appealed to the CAF, and it fell to Keegan to try to prove the provenance of the aircraft.
One of our CAF staffers, who is from Wisconsin, sort of keeps track of his hometown news stories, and he kind of brought it to me with the, can this really be true? It seemed quite unbelievable. In reading the materials that were assembled, there was a number of sort of factual inaccuracies that sort of made it believable that the whole story was in fact false. The name of the airplane, for instance, was identified as Belle of Birmingham because this had been the name of Colonel Donaldson's aircraft. Mind you, the story of Belle of Birmingham was known. That airplane was cut up. It was well documented. So there was this name, there was a serial number referenced, but there wasn't a real clear link between the two, and so it lent itself to some questioning and skepticism around the claim that Matt was making. I originally set out to disprove it.
First came the need to sort out fact from fiction. Keegan began with the serial number and, cross-referencing it against the aircraft's record card, he discovered that it had departed for England. He also confirmed that, as part of the 9th Troop Carrier Command, she belonged to the squadron of planes that was to drop the first regular troops into Normandy. What Keegan needed now was one further piece of evidence confirming Matt's findings that this was the lead plane.
One afternoon while we were searching, we stumbled into a company that has been digitizing films possessed by the National Archives here in the United States. And in one such search, we did find the serial number 4292847. The film was shot on the night of June 5th, right before the D-Day invasion began. And so we watched the film reel and realized only a couple minutes in that we were looking at 4292847 as the lead ship. The film showed the airplane, showed the generals sending it off. The film was that single piece of information that allowed us to confirm that the airplane had led the D-Day invasion.
So how did this detailed archive footage, shot the day before D-Day at the airbase from which the first planes left, come to be filmed?
Greenham Common, England. When Eisenhower came here on the 5th of June, he was accompanied by a retinue, the press corps, the media, members of the publicity and psychological warfare section. He'd helped establish this. He knew the value of propaganda and filmed a relaxed Eisenhower with the troops. They also filmed in detail the aircraft being prepared and paratroopers boarding, including the aircraft that would be leading the operation that day.
As the cameras zoomed in on the airplane and panned around it, there was a great deal of attention paid to this aircraft. It was obvious that the cameramen knew the historic significance of what they were looking at. And as the camera panned past the nose, the name "That's All Brother" appeared on the screen. And at that one instant in time, we realized, wow, this is its name. This is the story. This incredible airplane has been lost. And we're sitting here, and it's been found.
Finally, the correct name for the serial number had been found, alleviating Keegan's earlier doubts about the plane's provenance. The CAF were now driven by the need to acquire That's All Brother, and, in time, they struck a mutually satisfactory deal with Basler for her purchase and restoration.
And I bought this airplane probably more than 10 years ago, and I just had a feeling there was something with this airplane, so we never brought it through for conversion. I always moved it to the back of the line. Every time it came up for conversion, I pushed it to the back, just because I had this gut feeling there's something special about this airplane. Had we not done that, this airplane would have been flying somewhere else in the world as a BT-67 with turbine engines on it. We're bringing it in and bringing it back to the day it left the Douglas factory back in 1942.
This particular airplane was purchased by a friend of mine probably 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So ultimately he sold it here to Basler Turbo Conversions and called me and asked me to fly it here with him. So we flew the airplane up here, parked it out on the ramp just outside the building, and I admit unashamedly that when I walked away from it, I had a tear in my eye knowing that this airplane's days as a DC-3 were over. Fast forward, I think 7 years, fortunately we at the CAF were able to acquire this airplane and bring it back to its former glory and preserve this iconic piece of American history.
I think the first time that I saw the airplane up in Oshkosh, there was no nose art, anything like that. And there really wasn't anyone around. And it was profound to look up at this airplane and realize a string of lucky chances kept this airplane and kept it for us, waiting for us. It was over at Basler, and had it been a few aircraft ahead in the line, would have already been gone. I guess the gravity of the whole thing was actually that it had survived. And what really struck home was I climbed up inside the airplane and I stopped and stood in the doorway and realized, for whatever else that may have changed about the airplane, that door threshold hadn't. That was the door that those 101st Airborne paratroopers jumped out of. And a thought passed into my mind that when the 101st was established, their founding commander pointed out to the men while they were all assembled in a field that their division, the 101st Airborne Division, had no history, but that they were a division that had a rendezvous with destiny. And at that moment I realized, this is the door. This is where those men stepped out to attend that rendezvous with destiny. And that was a powerful thought. It's just sort of stopped me in my tracks, and it's still something that when I reflect on that moment, takes me back to this whole story and the excitement of finding the airplane.
January 1944. As the date for invasion drew closer, there was an urgent need for more C-47s. That's All Brother was being built, along with some 400 others, as part of a rush contract. She was accepted into the Army Air Force on March the 8th, a mere 3 months ahead of D-Day. The immediacy of her mission meant that the plane flew via the Atlantic Bridge directly to the UK.
The Atlantic Air Bridge was a vital supply chain for aircraft essential for the RAF and the United States Army Air Forces in Europe, flying from North American factories through Canada to Greenland to Iceland, over the treacherous icy wastes and the seas, coming in to Scotland and then to the frontline operations in England.
By the time she reached Greenham Common in the south of England, there were mere weeks of preparation until her defining moment, a defining moment for everyone. At Basler, the restoration work is underway.
Thankfully, the folks here at Basler, because of their work on the BT-67 turbo conversions, they have all of these parts in stock. And so there is nothing on a C-47 that they can't do relatively easily. And it's wonderful to see, you know, what 30 years ago you could find all across America. It's really exciting to be in a place like this and see the hands and the minds and the talent that exist in this restoration process.
Having saved the aircraft, the CAF's plan, in the light of her historical importance, is to return That's All Brother to France in 2019 as part of the D-Day anniversary celebrations. To achieve this ambitious goal, she must be in perfect flying condition to fly the arduous journey over the Atlantic, retracing her former steps.
This was the airplane that led the raid. There were some airplanes that went ahead of this airplane that were called Pathfinders. But when the actual we're gonna go, this very airplane that we're sitting in today was the airplane that launched out. Certainly the ultimate goal is to take this airplane back to D-Day, to the coast of France in 2019 for the 75th anniversary of the invasion.
So the plan is clear, albeit ambitious, but already time is at a premium and the pressure is on.
We have a warehouse there where the company has the parts for the C-47, and we do have a large reserve that we draw from. I've got the hydraulic landing gear pressure gauge here, and it was packaged in March of '45, and it remains unopened. We're looking for a serviceable gauge to use on that All Brother. This one I'll have to go out and look again for another one.
On such small but vital details do these restorations and ultimately lives depend.
If we can find one that there's no corrosion or anything, we'll have it sent in to make sure that it is serviceable gauge, and then we'll be able to install that onto the aircraft. Now this one looks in better shape than the first one that I had opened. Don't have the corrosion on it, so this would be a good candidate to send in and have it tested and certified.
The planes that preceded the main paratroop drop were called Pathfinder aircraft. Their mission was to drop Pathfinder units to establish the drop zones and set up radar systems to guide the main paratroop force.
They told us everything about the airborne operation, what time they were hitting the beaches. We knew pretty well the whole scheme of what was programmed. And it's just as well we did. We only lost one plane in Normandy, and we got the whole crew and all the parachuters back, because the plane ditched. It got hit by anti-aircraft fire, put out an engine from the island of Sark. And they landed in the water right next to a Canadian corvette. They've got their feet wet, but they stepped off onto the nets. It was off the side of the Corvette. The Corvette had to sink the airplane because it was a hazard to navigation. I saw it as the beginning of the end.
Following the Pathfinder units came the first wave of paratroopers. However, by then, the weather and enemy activity had significantly worsened.
We went across the channel. There was high cirrus clouds, so you could still see the shadows on the water below. And of course, you got all this equipment on you, and you know, in your pockets and everything, and it's pushing into you, and very uncomfortable. And then you've got bullets coming up through the floor and going out the ceiling, and you see that going on, and you think, you know, should I get up and move here? How about over there? I don't know. And then somebody gets shot, laying on the floor, and you look at the guy and you think, damn, let's get it. Everybody says, let's get the hell out of here. Come on, let's get out of here. That's what they did. They said, hey, we want out. Let's go. Let's go. What's holding it up? Your adrenaline is running, and if you can't assuage that adrenaline, it ruins you. It's hard on you, mentally and physically. And so you're sitting there and you can't do anything about it. And so the instinct then is to get away from the position you're in. Getting out that door looks better than staying there. And that's the feeling of everybody.
We're at the American Cemetery in Normandy, and amongst the thousands of graves, young men resting here, we found one, William D. Cross, from the 101st Airborne. But he died on June the 6th, 1944, in that first wave. William Cross was one of those 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles, the young men that leapt out of the aircraft, including That's All Brother. So she, as we move on in history, will take that story forward and will honour and remember the young men that leapt from that C-47. Freedom isn't free, and this makes that point more clearly than anywhere else you will ever find.
This airplane at some point in its life had an executive interior in it, and insulation was fitted between these bell formers here, and then an interior was put in, and when it was converted back to a freighter, and they put a cargo liner in here and failed to take out the insulation, and that insulation trapped water. So from the floorboards to the ceiling, the entire airframe that we're sitting in right now was riddled with corrosion.
We can't clean this up and reuse it. We definitely have to make a new one. We've got it's cracked there, it's got some corrosion cracking in here, and we just can't repair that part, so we're going to make a brand new one. We don't happen to have these in stock at all, so we have to produce this again. So this is another example where we have to take this original part, we'll put it on a piece of phenolic, we'll trace it out, we'll grind it out, we'll grind all the correct angles on it, we'll make another template, and then we'll form it, and then it'll go through our inspection process, and then it will go on our airplane.
We're going to tear out all of the electrical wiring in the airplane and start from scratch. So the engines will come off shortly. That's a relatively straightforward process. They'll go out and they'll be overhauled and brought back and put on. There's still a lot of radial engines in service, both in the commercial service and in the museum/airshow Warbird community. So we have good access to good overhaulers, and that piece is fairly straightforward. Again, the most challenging part is money.
The team at Basler were hoping simply to recover the original ailerons, but after removing the old fabric and having cleaned the metal, they discovered they needed a much more thorough and time-intensive restoration. The team set about replacing corroded parts, reusing as much of the original structure as possible, and recovering with new fabric, employing the same skills she would have recognized when first built.
The control surfaces on most World War II airplanes were fabric covered because fabric was a non-strategic material. Aluminum was in short supply. And they also knew that lighter control surfaces flew better and were less susceptible to flutter. And so many of the World War II airplanes, up to and including the high-speed fighters, had fabric control surfaces on it. So fabric is an old skill. Some would say a lost art, but it's obviously alive and well here in Wisconsin.
Meanwhile, the engines have returned after being fully overhauled, and the CAF are one step closer to their dream of returning that soul brother to Normandy.
Now this is an 1830, Pratt & Whitney's powered 1830. Of course, we're looking at a 14-cylinder twin roll radial engine, producing a little over 1,000 horse. This engine has been through the overhaul facility, completely overhauled to 0 time. We have procured a new exhaust for this engine. The old exhaust has been too many years of wear and tear. Everything in this thing will be back to the way it was when it was flying coming out of the factory. It's gone from a serviceable airplane to an overhauled airframe. I love this project. It's been great. I'm really excited to see this thing get finished and get up and flying.
We're very close to installation of the remaining cockpit items, control column, connecting up flight control cables. We're in the process of doing the hydraulic and engine fuel plumbing. Following that, we'll have to run control cables and engine control cables as well as flight control cables. The engine has proven itself to be a workhorse, and this engine is expensive nowadays to overhaul or maintain, but it is really amazing if you stop to consider the engine itself, that it was designed in a time before computers and all that. So the men that not only flew it but designed it was a great generation of men.
I carried about 125 pounds on me, and I weighed 132. And some guys carried more than that, some of the bigger guys. We carried a mine. Everybody carried a tank mine. We carried about 6 grenades. We all carried about 50 feet of primacord, most of it wrapped around our helmet. We carried 12 blasting caps in our pocket. Now in civilian life, you can't even have those in the same vehicle. When you go to buy them, you can't carry caps and explosive in the same thing. We carried them right on us. We also carried C2, which was a very powerful new type of explosive. But I carried an M1 rifle. All the non-coms carried a folding stock carbine, 30 caliber carbine. And we carried 3 days ration. That means 9 K rations. And whatever else we wanted in the way of equipment. We're supposed to carry socks, but nobody did. I didn't take my boots off for the whole 30 days. And when I took them off, there was no socks. It was like Jell-O, and I just took it like that and sloughed it off my feet.
Back at Basler, and just in time, attention turns to the wings. Along with the engines, these are the final major components to be fitted, and consequently allow the team to focus more closely on her authenticity in every detail.
In the sort of landscape of warbirds, it's really interesting to observe where people's attentions and where their interests lie. If you're restoring a P-51 Mustang, you can find out the exact proportion of lamp black that was applied to the zinc chromate at North American in Inglewood, so that your Mustang can come out as a Concours winning Mustang, And you can do a similar thing with a B-17, but it hasn't been done with a C-47. They're sort of the forgotten warhorse of the war years. They carried all these men, they carried all the air cargo, they ferried the wounded back out of Normandy. In the specific case of That's All Brother, it participates in every major Allied airborne operation in the remainder of the war following D-Day. And what you can't find anywhere is any of that information. There's no book written on how to put the airplane back together or how it looked during the war. They were so ubiquitous, they went through a dozen different cockpit configurations. They soldiered on for so long after the war that there isn't one out there that survives truly unmodified, out there flying. And so for us, surveying the scale of the task and the importance of the airplane, it became really evident that if there ever was an airplane that needed to be showcased in its D-Day configuration, this would be that airplane, and that it was high time that a C-47 was restored to its wartime configuration as a tribute to the men and women who flew them.
The young airmen sitting in the cockpit of a C-47 faced fear. They faced the fear of anti-aircraft fire. They were at low altitude. Light AA fire could hit the aircraft, pierce the thin fuselage, and the pilots could sense the agitation of the paratroopers at the rear who wanted to get out and fight. And as the aircraft disgorged its parabundles and paratroopers, the centre of gravity shifted, the weight altered, the aircraft would rise. They had to keep the plane in formation and under control, and adjust and react to trim the C-47 as it shed its load over the battle zone. Many young men were lost. C-47s could be seen going down, but their job was to focus, to make sure that they got their aircraft over the drop zone.
A few weeks later, and That's All Brother is preparing for an important milestone in the restoration, the testing of her engines. Though every precaution has been taken, these are always anxious moments.
The engines are freshly overhauled. It's an absolutely critical time when all of the mechanics and the people who've been in charge of the restoration have been finishing the different systems on the airplane, verify that all of those things are functional before we put pilots in the airplane and attempt to take off.
Squawks are noted, checked on the run. Nope. Aircraft and area clear. Lock pins installed. Wheels are chocked. Chocks here. Oil quantity 15 gallons minimum.
It was checked before we left the hangar. I got mixtures of cut off, throttles at idle, and props are forward. We are ready for an engine start. Come on. Dave, are we ready to make history again?
I think so.
History's coming alive. It is absolutely outstanding. There really is not a lot of maintenance left to be done. We're really close for first flights.
Perhaps the most special thing about it was as the aircraft approached full throttle on the engines, you could see it just sort of shake in the chocks. You could see lift forming under the wings and under the tail. And as the airplane sat there jumping up and down, I don't think there was anyone among us who couldn't imagine how exciting it was going to be to see this airplane fly. The sentiment is that it wants to fly at this point. After 3 years of restoration and more than 22,000 man-hours, the airplane is ready, and we are very nearly ready to let it fly.
In the brief interim, That's All Brother has been fitted with vital new engine cowlings, and her landing gear has been satisfactorily and thoroughly tested. With the new cowlings in place, it has been possible to run the engines at full power. The signs are good, but still her team anxiously await the plane's most demanding test, her first flight.
Well, it's really exciting to be here. For me personally, to close the loop, the last time this airplane flew, I got to fly it in here. And to be honored to be the guy selected to fly it today is humbling and exciting. You know, this airplane represents a big step in the Commemorative Air Force. You know, when I started flying Warbirds, CAF and other Warbirds, you know, over 30 years ago, the difference between a Warbird and a freighter was a paint job. And this airplane represents how far we've come, both as the Commemorative Air Force and as a Warbird industry, that we now have these examples of flying Warbirds that are truly exquisite. You know, the big gotchas on any first flight in an airplane, are the propellers going to govern correctly? Anytime you're flying a brand new engine, there is a chance of an initial failure. And so we got 2 new engines. You'd always choose to overhaul engines one at a time. Now we got 2 brand new engines, which is not what you'd want in a perfect world, but initial failures on new engines are always a threat, but typically they're not catastrophic failures, they're chronic failures. And so the first 20 hours on a new engine, you're always paying very close attention. And so no need or cause for any undue concern.
All right, welcome everyone to the first flight. Thank you everyone for being here. We're going to start off the safety briefing with the pilots. So Doug, Tom, are you guys ready to go? All right, aircraft from maintenance. Aircraft is ready to go. As far as the weather goes, we've kind of checked multiple sources. The weather's about as good as we're going to get in January in Wisconsin. So the snow that's out there right now is going to let off in the afternoon, so we should be able to get a good flight in this afternoon with adequate ceilings. The winds are 14 gusting to 20, but they're coming down the runway. Based on the direction, we plan on using the west runway, and we'll go with that.
They are as prepared as they can be, and yes, every conceivable precaution has been taken. Nonetheless, there's no disguising the tension felt by everyone as the moment of takeoff arrives.
It is a piece of American history, very important, and it has to be treated as such with respect and a lot of care. We look at the temperatures, pressures, leaks, anything like that. Is it making power? And just an overall shakedown of the airplane. We expect to fly 30 minutes the first time just to be sure that everything's working correctly. We'd like to get 3 flights on it today, but daylight may be an issue later.
This was the airplane, the very airplane that led the raid. And I'm so proud of our organization, the Commemorative Air Force, that we've been able to bring it to this place. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of money that's got to be raised, a lot of volunteer work that's got to be done. You know, this is the beginning, not the end. As you can see, she needs a paint job. All the interior fitments need to be done. And the volunteers back at Centex Wing and San Marcos are going to get to work on that just as soon as we get it out of here, and look forward to having, you know, the queen of the C-47 fleet as a member of the CAF.
After being in the air for 20 minutes, all happily without incident, That's All Brother successfully completes her maiden flight and returns for the necessary and thorough ground checks that follow.
It's a magnificent flight. Great airplane. We have a winner here.
He only had one job, and that was not to let me screw up, and he did his job. On behalf of the Commemorative Air Force, I'd like to give a big thank you to all the employees at Basler. You guys have done a great job. It's been a real thrill for me to watch your team get behind and get engaged and get excited about this project. You know, and this airplane is going to lead you to a new place. And to the thousands of men who bailed out of C-47s and walked on the beach in Normandy on June 6th of 1944, hear, hear.
Here.
Her time at Basler now completed, That's All Brother is flown well over 1,000 miles from Wisconsin to the central Texas wing of the CAF in San Marcos. The crew at Centex eagerly await the arrival of their new star, aware of her historical importance and their role in helping to preserve her heritage.
We're excited to have That's All Brother back here in Texas. As with any plane, especially one that's nearly 75 years old, there's always a couple things we got to work out. Well, as you can see, if you look up here, there's some of these tubes, and one of these tubes comes from the blower section of the engine. And every time we're shutting the engine down, you can kind of see all these drops down here that get scattered about. That just means that when it was dripping, the wind was blowing, but sometimes it'll make a tight puddle, sometimes it'll leave oil in drops like that. But that's something we really want to look at.
Following the restoration and what we're calling phase 2 of the restoration, the historic interior, we'll also have to paint the airplane. The invasion stripes, another characteristic marking that'll be on the airplane, is something else we're looking forward to because we intend to put them back on the way they were applied during World War II. The men of the 87th Troop Carrier Squadron found out on a Sunday that they had to paint all of their airplanes with these invasion stripes before the mission. And having not enough white and black paint on the base, they decided to break into local English hardware stores, take the black and white paint, leaving IOU notes for the shopkeeps, going back to the field and painting the airplanes with mops.
Clearly the stripes were there for a purpose, but what was it, and why now? The basis for the story starts at Greenham Common, from where That's All Brother took off on D-Day and where she and many other aircraft were given their invasion stripes.
Approaching June the 5th, an order was issued to paint invasion stripes on the aircraft because the Allies had learned from the parachute drops in Sicily. Many aircraft had been destroyed by friendly fire. Army and Navy gunners were not good at aircraft recognition, and to help them, big, bold, black and white stripes were hastily added to the aircraft as an identification aid so they wouldn't be suffering friendly fire when they flew over the invasion fleet. Now, of course, we recognize from the photographs these are iconic symbols of the invasion, the black and white stripes. They date that critical moment in history. Unpainted, it wasn't D-Day. Painted, it was D-Day.
Overnight, the ships blossomed out in their new war paint. On D-2, invasion markings were applied. Another lesson from Sicily.
The aircraft were prepared, the lead plane chosen, but she needed an experienced pilot, one to offer the leadership required for this crucial mission. John Manolin Donaldson, the man selected to pilot That's All Brother, was an inspired and inspiring choice. He was born in 1901 in Alabama. He joined the Alabama Air National Guard and swiftly rose to the rank of base commander, a role he performed at several US AAF bases across America. He was subsequently promoted to commander of the 438th Troop Carrier Group, training in Northern California prior to departing for England. He had shown in training great precision in group formation flying and, critically, the accuracy of dropping paratroops. Less certain is quite why he changed from his original squadron, flying anti-submarine patrols, to flying C-47s instead.
Donaldson's a really, really interesting character. He actually became a pilot in 1924. So he's a pioneer in aviation, and that's really the mystery that remains today, is why did he go to C-47s? And I just don't know. I have a theory because early in the war, my squadron flew anti-submarine patrols off the coast of Miami in unarmed O-47s. And so I don't know if he just didn't like that and he wanted to be more involved, or if they saw, hey, this is a pilot with almost 20 years of flying experience, when there's very few pilots out there that have that much flight experience. Well, I had the opportunity to meet his daughter, actually, before she passed away. And right after I found the airplane in 2007, we thought that it was Belle of Birmingham, because newspapers at the time say Belle of Birmingham. General Lewis Brereton, commander of the 9th Air Force, his journal, which I have a copy of, it listed as Belle of Birmingham. And yeah, that's because Donaldson and Daniel normally flew Belle of Birmingham. They were both from the same hometown. We later found out Belle of Birmingham was likely Daniel's plane. We can't confirm that. It may have been Donaldson's, but we don't know.
So how come Belle of Birmingham didn't lead the mission? One likely reason lies in the requirement for radar being fitted to the C-47s, which necessitated a hole being cut in the bottom of the fuselage. It may be that Donaldson was wary of Belle of Birmingham undergoing this surgery. So a recently arrived C-47 was selected and subsequently named.
Donaldson's daughter is the one that told me, yes. He didn't want to cut the holes in Belle of Birmingham, and so he got this new one, and he's the one that named the airplane, That's All Brother. And yes, there's a song at the time. A lot of people have said it's named after the song. According to her, it's not. According to her, it was a message to Hitler, just like the end of Looney Tunes where Porky Pig says, "That's all, folks." That's all, brother.
We tried to get as many of the details correct as we could. I mean, our source material are grainy, black and white photographs and technical orders, that were written in 1943 and 1944. Air Corps went through all of those and did their best to come up with the color specifications and marking placements for all the detail on the airplanes. And then, of course, the big one, which was the detail on the invasion stripes. And the story is those stripes, they weren't masked. They were painted on with mops and brushes. And so our goal was to kind of honor that history. We actually had them paint the stripes on by hand without masks. So the lines aren't perfectly straight. Nothing is perfect. If you get close and look, you'll notice the detail is much like it would have looked again on June 6, 1944. So we got what we were going for.
Still missing from the freshly painted plane is the all-important nose art. Back at Centex, the attention to detail is exhaustive. The drive to replicate the original art takes both time and skill.
The only thing I can think is, if anything, some of the letters up top might need individually twisting, but I think this is looking pretty sweet.
We made sure the lettering was correct. I drew it all up on the computer based on the historic photos, and we made little tweaks and adjustments, projected it on the plane to get it in the right location based on the historic photos. And even from there, up on the scaffold, we were making adjustments to the individual letters to try and get it as close as we could to being the accurate nose art that it wore in 1944. It's special.
It's been 74 years since D-Day, and there are not a lot of people alive today that actually remember it being there. That were actually part of D-Day. There are a lot of people that have heard stories, but as time passes, those memories fade. And what's cool about this project to me is that it's almost a rebirth in some ways of a D-Day veteran. So we're taking something that was old and forgotten, and we're bringing it back to life and making it real again. And we're taking it back to where it had its greatest challenge and its greatest accomplishments.
Oshkosh Air Show 2018. After great diligence and research, undertaken in particular by Matt Scales, The CAF have located many relatives of those who flew in That's All Brother in wartime. To mark her official relaunch, the families have been invited not only to see the plane for the first time, but to participate in an emotional memorial flight.
My dad was a piece of history, and we didn't really even know about it until about 3 years ago when we found all his photographs and his medals. I mean, we knew he was in the war, but he really didn't talk about it. And when we would ask questions, he would just say, well, I was in the war. He just briefly would say, oh, I went on leave to England, I went to France, but other than that, he really didn't seem to want to talk about it.
Officer was squadron navigator while overseas, flying in lead position in combat missions. Participated in the paratroop and glider drop invasions of Normandy, southern France, Wesel, Germany, and Holland. Has flown as navigator on flights using dead reckoning, pilotage, radio, celestial, and radar navigation.
We're going to be up for about 30 minutes, and what we're going to do is, once we're airborne and cruising at a level altitude, I'm going to give you a signal to disconnect your seatbelts. You can walk up to the cabin or the cockpit. If you do that, would you just please? No, we've got 13 people to get through. Get through that as fast as you can. Maybe we can do a second one. Anybody that's going in the back, no more than 2 in the back at a time. And when you sit back down, please put the seat belts on in case we have a bump or something, okay? Now when we get up there, we get everybody seat belted in, then I'll give you where the emergency exits are located, how to get out if we have an incident. We probably won't, but we want to make sure everybody understands where to get out, just like we do in the airlines. And we're going to have a good flight. I believe Tom Travis is going to tell you how and where we're going to go. I'm just going to turn him over to him.
We're going to take off, go south, go right over the top of Oshkosh. And so get your cameras ready. It's a magnificent sight today. Lots of airplanes, lots of activity. And so we'll go down south of Oshkosh, turn around and come back. We're about 2,000 feet above the ground. So you should be able to get some good photos. We appreciate you flying with us again, and welcome aboard.
He wants to do, so we can work that out.
Right on the other side of this wall would have been where my father was sitting. And it's just a neat feeling to be that close to him.
Between my military flying, my civilian flying, I've flown a lot of airplanes and a lot of time in the air, and this is definitely the most special flight I've ever been a part of, that's for sure. And again, all because of the family members. All goes back to them.
It was very emotional for me to be on the plane today, and I actually sat down where he was sitting when we were flying, and it was very emotional for me. I broke down, and just to know that he was sitting there so long ago in that exact spot was a phenomenal feeling.
Following the success of the flight, and to round off the official relaunch, an event is held in the evening to which relatives, friends and supporters are invited and celebrated. However, for the CAF, it is a bittersweet moment.
I'd like to take just a moment to talk about a very serious situation that many of you have heard about. The mission to Normandy was planned to have 3 CAF aircraft make the historic journey across the Atlantic. As all of you know, Blue Bonnet Bell had an accident on takeoff Saturday morning. I'm sure you share my thankfulness that all of the occupants were able to exit the aircraft successfully. It is with great sadness to share that the Bluebonnet Belle is destroyed. The loss of the aircraft is no doubt heartbreaking, and I've spoken with the crew, and I'm happy to share that all are recovering from the accident. The loss of this particular aircraft is a reminder to all of us of the dwindling numbers of these historic aircraft, that we must honor and tell the stories of those who served in World War II. And this makes tonight all the more important.
As if the loss of Bluebonnet Belle were not enough of a setback for the CAF, there is soon further bad news. Potentially, given all that is at stake, worse news. The problem with the oil leak on That's All Brothers' left engine has escalated considerably after the extra hours of flying time, and consequently the engine urgently needs attention. The plane is returned to Basler turbo conversions and the engine is removed. While the complex maintenance is carried out, That's All Brother remains grounded and crippled in her hangar. The date with destiny in France in June 2019 cannot be changed, but now the fears grow that she won't make it at all. As the work on That's All Brother's stricken engine continues, the CAF are reminded that such occurrences were not uncommon during wartime. Many new C-47s had similar engine problems before they reached the combat theatre. Pathfinder pilot David Hamilton recalls one such event in North Africa.
My crew chief, my radio operator, my co-pilot and I, and two guys from the PBY Naval School, because same engine in the PBY. We changed the engine, got it to work fine. I eventually got in, checked into Casablanca to air material because I had to have it cleared. And Bob Hoover was the captain, clearance officer. And he said, "Is the airplane flying fine?" I said, "Yes, just going great, no problem." He said, "Sign here." Boom, have a good trip. And I went to England.
The engine suppliers and the team at Basler had been hard at work. To everyone's great relief, the engine repair was completed successfully, and once again, the Pratt & Whitney power plant was reunited with That's All Brother. The process requires great patience as well as skill. The team take all the time required to carefully position and reattach the repaired engine. It is vital to keep to the schedule and to ensure the success of her mission that this all goes according to plan. Central to the events that led up to D-Day and to events marking the 75th anniversary, Greenham Common stands as witness to all that went before.
When Eisenhower arrived here, he had made a famous uplifting speech for the morale of the men. But Eisenhower had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he knew beyond that morale-boosting speech, everything might fail. In the event of it going disastrously wrong, Eisenhower had prepared a letter to be issued accepting full responsibility for the failure of D-Day. That version of history did not happen. Not far from where I'm standing stood That's All Brother. The aircraft had been readied by the ground crew, working hard to make sure everything was as prepared as it could be for the vital mission being flown that night. The men were anxiously waiting to board. They knew they were going into combat and they had been waiting and preparing for hours. Last letters home, checking the pouches, sharpening the bayonets once more, and getting the haircuts, the Mohican haircuts, competing with one another for those blackened faces with red or white stripes. Who could look the most ghoulish? And then waiting to take off as the sun set on June the 5th, 1944.
All the while in wartime France, the resistance had been on standby for many weeks, awaiting word of the forthcoming invasion. At last, D-Day was imminent.
The resistance were working with the Allies. Communication was going backwards and forwards across the Channel, and the resistance were waiting for a particular message. And that message came on the evening of June the 5th. Immediately they started to disrupt German communications, telephone lines cut, telegraph poles destroyed, train tracks blown up, trains misdirected, anything to disrupt and prevent the Germans bringing through reinforcements to assist the Allies.
On Greenham Common, ahead of the invasion force, the very first wave was leaving the Pathfinder planes, carrying troops capable of setting up strategic radar beacons needed to guide the main wave to the predetermined drop zones. At long last, D-Day proper was underway.
We had a final briefing and relaxed, went through the sand tables again, the drop procedure. Then we slept and ate a little. And then we went out to the plains at around, I'd say maybe 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And then we took off, and 3 ship formations. The 101st took off first. They had a little further to go. And the 82nd planes, 9 of us, we took off later. The last 2 planes were the drop zones for the glider landing. There was a fog bank, unreported, over the drop area. And nobody broke radio silence to let us know. But amazingly, we stuck in formation. And drop zone T-Tear had 3 planes drop in there, and the drop was perfect. The flak was intense, but small arms. And I had lots of holes in my airplane, but mostly 25 caliber Schmeiser machine pistol, which will give you an idea of how low I was after I got rid of my troopers. Because I dropped my troopers starting at 800 feet, got down to about 680. Then they pulled in the static lines and I hit the deck. And we had to lift our right wing to go by the church steeple of St. Mary Glees. And the only 101st had 1 drop zone where the plane had to do a 360 and go back, but it eventually, every Pathfinder landed in his drop zone.
Going across, it was, you could look down and see all those ships down there, and you realized that this was the largest armada of ships that anybody has ever seen. People have asked me if we were afraid. No, we were not afraid. There was a little apprehension because we'd never done this before, but that also worked in the fact that we weren't afraid because we didn't know we'd never done it. We didn't know how bad this was going to be. So we came close to the coast, then the clouds rolled in. We were flying in serials of 9 planes. The first plane in each serial was the only one that had a navigator. There was on the ground a thing called a Eureka. It would send a beam up to the plane. They had a Rebecca. There were those, in every area they had a guy on the ground with the Eureka, and you're supposed to home in on him. But what happened when they got into this cloud bank, we were flying almost propeller to tail. So the first thing they did, self-preservation, scatter, or we're going to wreck. In doing that, they lost the navigator. So the 8 planes behind him had no idea where they were because the navigator was gone. They were so certain because of the time element that they had flown that they were dropping people in the right place, and they were not.
This is French soil, compressed for too long by the Germans. The Americans were coming to liberate. Many of them tragically did not land on good French soil. They landed in the marshes that the Germans had flooded deliberately as a defensive mechanism. And many of them tragically drowned because, unlike the British quick release harness, quarter turns, snap, you are out, The Americans had a more complex harness with straps that tightened as you descended, that were hard to release, and some of the poor paratroopers landed up to their necks in water. They had to take a breath to go down and try and get their trench knives out to cut the harness clear. Others just did not have the time. They drowned. Many were lost in these marshes.
It was good and bad. It was bad because our plan fell apart. It was good because it confused the Germans. They just had no idea of how many people there were. All they knew was that every place they looked, there was paratroopers. And as far as actual fear, I stood in the door and looked out, and I felt no fear at the time, and I've talked to the other guys, and none of them have said the same thing. It was fascinating. You could see all of those heavy caliber tracers coming up. Every fifth shell that was coming up was a tracer, but it looked solid. They were hitting the planes next to us. There were planes blowing up. They were coming up through, hitting people in the plane. And we were so low that the ground fire from machine guns was coming up on through the planes. And all we could think of then was, let's get out of here.
Despite the thickening fog banks and the associated challenges for the rudimentary radar, Donaldson found his way to the drop zone.
Well, studying the maps, we think we're now on the spot where that tall brother deposited the paratroops on board her aircraft. But she put, through Donaldson's courage, her men where they were meant to be. And that was the time, the green light and out. They were helpless. They feared as they leapt out of the aircraft and descended from the skies here that they would be machine gunned, and many were. In the darkness, they were trying to find one another. They had their little clickers. Was it somebody friendly? Hopefully you got a responding click. It would be one of your men. Then 1, 2, 3 others gathered. Around 75 of them made a textbook attack on Saint-Marie-de-Mont. They positioned machine guns to enfilade the enemy, and they went in, almost leapfrogging, building to building. And in a brief, fierce combat there, they took the church. And within hours, many objectives had been achieved, which made it possible then for the troops coming up from the beaches to proceed, to some extent, as planned. And through the night into the early hours of the morning, that bitter, vicious combat went on. But slowly but surely, the Americans gained the upper hand.
Our objective for my battalion, or my company, was 2 bridges near Brevans. One was a pedestrian bridge and one a vehicle bridge. Those were built a few months before we went over to funnel reinforcements down to the beach forces. That was critical that we had to stop that. We did take the bridges the first day.
The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were in action 33 and 24 days respectively. The 82nd, having captured Saint-Mère-Église and secured the bridgehead across the Mer de Ré River, destroyed other river crossings, protected the flank of the 7th Army Corps, and drove west to the Douve River. The 101st seized the areas assigned it, destroyed bridges, and drove on to Carentan to establish a defense area there.
We were supposed to be in there 3 days. That's what shock troops do. They are not defensive people ordinarily. But they had nobody else to put in. It was harder than they thought, so they decided to keep us in. We were in it for 33 days before we went back to England.
Dropping the paratroops and their part in preparing the way proved vital for the wave after wave of ground troops who landed amid such heavy fire on the beaches. Though many pilots had not found their predetermined drop zones, due in large part to the fog, the paratroops' role proved crucial in opening up lines through which the Allied forces could advance. As part of her preparations, That's All Brother regularly takes to the air, not least of all to put time on her freshly repaired engine. Today, she adds extra purpose to her flight, this time to Dayton, Ohio, to reconnect with a familiar face and one of the original paratroopers, Jim Pee Wee Martin.
So today we are flying that Saw Brother up to Dayton, Ohio to meet with Pee Wee Martin. Pee Wee was one of the original Toccoa band of brothers. He jumped on D-Day with 101st Airborne, and he actually jumped at the 70th anniversary of D-Day when he was 92 years old. He helped a lot in the initial fundraising and getting together for That's All Brother when we made the initial presentation and all. So we are taking That's All Brother to Dayton, Ohio today, and his family's going to bring him out here. We're hoping that he's going to be in good enough health that he's going to be able to get in and take a ride with us. We'll take he and his family for a ride in the airplane that he jumped, not the airplane, but the type of airplane that he jumped out of 75 years ago next month. On D-Day, there were 800 airplanes that took off carrying paratroopers, carrying gliders, and they all followed this airplane. There are a lot of Warbirds out there that are painted up like famous airplanes, but they're not really the airplane. This is the airframe that was that led everything at D-Day.
This trip we're on today really provides us with a great opportunity to take the airplane on some very long legs, and we can validate our fuel burns and our oil consumption. And there's been a lot of things that have come up on this trip that have just been good pointers. And it's a little chilly today, so we're getting a little experience with how the airplane operates in the cold. Because, you know, in about 6 weeks, we're going to launch out to go across the North Atlantic on the same blue spruce routes that C-47s flew to Europe by the thousands in World War II. I think this airplane really has been a defining airplane for the CAF. You know, we've got 170 airplanes scattered all across the country, and you know, most of our airplanes never went overseas and don't have a lot of historical provenance. This airplane, hands down, is the most historically significant airplane that we have in the CAF fleet. So I really think that's something new and really exciting for the CAF.
Two concerns now are the temperature and visibility. Despite these, the crew are keen to put That's All Brother through her wintertime paces, with the upcoming Atlantic crossing very much in mind.
Hey, Pee Wee, how are you? Good. Good to see you.
Hello, sir. How are you? All right, very good.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. Yes, I could have.
After a short but emotional flight, That's All Brother returns to the airfield and, with visibility mercifully improved, lands safely.
We have heard people over and over and over and say, thank you for your sacrifice. I have never considered my service a sacrifice. I have always considered it an honor and a privilege to have been a part of history. And I sincerely mean that, because I'm just a little guy, a country bumpkin, and all of a sudden I'm thrust in the limelight because I went to Normandy. See, and what's important now about all of this restoration and what you are doing right now is that we're going to be gone, and you're going to be the last people to have talked to somebody that's actually been there, and you're going to preserve that. You think about that. There is no glory in combat, believe me. There's no glory. There is afterwards, but not while you're doing it. I'm not usually emotional, but I'm pretty emotional today.
Bring whatever looks good. Okay.
Thank you.
And I thank all of you people that have done for me.
Well, thank you.
When you stumble into a story as big as That's All Brother, as the airplane that led the invasion, having gone missing and been found, that airplane is fundamentally important. The D-Day narrative, the experience of the men who fought in that battle, and the importance of this relic, these airplanes represent, or specifically this airplane, a part of what makes us who we are today, is wrapped up in this machine. Those men who were on board flew over willing to risk their lives, knowing full well they wouldn't all make it back, in the cause of global freedom. This airplane has already lasted longer than any of the men who flew it that night or who jumped from it that night. And that is a small taste of how important it is, because for generations to come, this airplane will represent the only real link to that time. This airplane will be a time machine that reminds people that it was real, that those challenges were there, that tyranny was a problem, and that people were willing to stand up and sort of fight for what was right.
With many successful stops in the United States behind her, That's All Brother was all set to complete her mission. Flying the North Atlantic Bridge route via Canada, Greenland, Iceland, and a few locations in the UK, she is heading for Normandy once again. With her modern-day counterpart beside her, That's All Brother prepares to drop her paratroopers in, this time in commemoration of all that she, and the hundreds like her, had achieved those 75 years earlier.
Since we acquired this airplane, the plan has always been to bring this airplane back to Europe for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And now we're, on the eve of it. It's pretty spectacular. It's just hard to put in words how long this journey's been, but it's a great feeling to be here. And what's really exciting is how much attention that this event, all these airplanes coming together to go to Normandy, has really drawn a lot of public attention to D-Day and what happened 75 years ago just across the channel, and the sacrifice of those brave veterans, and the courage of the young Americans and Brits and Dutch that walked across the threshold of airplanes like this and walked off the LSTs into the surf on June 6th.
Well, the key to it is those were kids. They were just kids off the farm, and they're stepping into the unknown. But they were up to the task, and it's our job to honor them and never let people forget the sacrifices they made to give us the freedoms that we enjoy today. That's the important part.
It's been years of planning, years of work to get That's All Brother flying again and able to come across the ocean. And we are all over the moon to finally be here. What we're doing today has no comparison to the level of danger they faced. And they did it out of a sense of duty for their country and to liberate occupied Europe. And we're here to celebrate all the achievements and all the sacrifices that they made.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
When the actual we're gonna go, this very airplane that we're sitting in today was the airplane that launched out.
Everybody says we're heroes, and that isn't true. We volunteered to do this, we trained to do it, and we were paid to do it. That does not make you a hero.